Hi, I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy, real life therapy sessions as they happen. On this week's episode, we'll be exploring how knowledge is nice, but ultimately it's action that creates change, and how it's not what happens in the therapy room that changes our lives, but the actions that we take outside of it. Stay tuned till the end for my top tip on how setting boundaries for yourself can be an act of self-love. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon to be notified as new episodes are released, and follow my other social channels for daily inspiration and support. In this week's episode, we catch up with David, who approached In Therapy to get help with depression. Recently, David has been experiencing states of anxiety and a feeling of overwhelm, which he says stem from loneliness. In our last session, we discussed how David wants companionship in his life, but holds himself back from meeting someone due to feelings of inadequacy. David, good to see you. What's been happening? Last time I saw you, we were particularly talking about relationships and some of the potential blocks in terms of things that happened in the past, beliefs, inner critic. I've been curious as to what's come from that reflection.
I don't know, nothing particularly good. I have been navel gazing. There's no great insights. It's just, I just sort of, I guess, there's things that I'm unhappy with and things that I don't feel, adequate about. By the same token, there's been a few occasions where I've been talking to friends and stuff who have been going through a tough time. And, I'm much more able to sort of, for want of a better term, bum them up. It's that kind of, sort of, yeah, you're great, you just need to believe in yourself and all that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to me, it's like, sitting alone in my room thinking, you fucking, you piece of shit. What are you whinging about now? So yeah, I mean, if anything, it's just...
It's almost more stark in a sense.
Yeah.
Going back to the homework, and you were saying that there was no good that came in a sense. Part of the reason of the homework was to dig out the bad in a sense, to make it more explicit so we can potentially work with it. What were some of those things that you saw?
Just a sort of neediness and inadequacy. Almost that, well, why would you deserve any better? Which is, my Jiminy Cricket.
Yeah, so there's a
fatalism, I guess.
Say more.
It just feels like it's quite a fatalistic thing. It just feels like this is not going to change, and you're not going to be able to change it.
Almost like this is how it's always been. This is how it's always going to be. This is who you are.
Yeah.
This is your lot in a sense.
Yeah.
When we put a spotlight on that, and you recognise that's the belief system, that's how you're talking to yourself. What do you think about that? Do you think is that actually true, or is that something that you've just got used to telling yourself a story about?
I don't know. I mean, it's definitely something I've got used to thinking and believing. But I don't know whether it's the truth or not. But
let's have a bit of a thought experiment. Let's say that it's not true, but you believe it's true.
Yeah.
What would be the consequence of believing that's true? Like, how would that affect your actions, your behaviour, how you would be around women?
Well, I mean, I guess it's you end up sort of just shutting down and closing down and sort of closing yourself off. It's weird because it's like, I would say the majority of my friends are women.
There's a difference between being friends with someone and being in an intimate relationship with someone.
Yeah.
Because you don't strike me as someone that is in any way uncomfortable being around women or talking to women, or indeed enjoying the company of women and being enjoyed by women in the company of women, as it were. But it sounds like that there is some beliefs around your capacity or potential of being in an intimate relationship.
Yeah.
What we believe determines the actions that we take.
Yeah.
And the actions that we take have a big impact then on what happens in our life. So if we take, for example, you've made a really good change in your career in the last few months. If your belief system had been 6 months ago, no one's going to want to employ me, I'm not going to be able to change jobs, there's no point, I'm not even good at what if you had a bunch of really limiting beliefs there, you wouldn't have put your name forward for certain things, you wouldn't have applied for certain roles, you would have gone into interviews and not performed at all well because you would just send off these negative vibes. But you had a level of belief in yourself, partly helped perhaps by some of the work that you'd been doing in terms of calming things down and being more grounded. But your beliefs helped you take the actions to make that possible. If we take some of these beliefs that it sounds like are there around relationships, my question to you is what is the consequence of those beliefs? Like, what are the opportunities that are being missed because of the beliefs that are there?
Well, it's hard to tell because we're in the middle of a pandemic, so it's not like I'm bar hopping much.
I mean, I agree with you. Being in a pandemic doesn't help.
Yeah.
And not wanting to unfairly bring my colleagues into this episode, Oliver and Rachel have both met partners in the pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that to them every day, but they don't listen.
Yeah.
but my point is, it's another good example of that's how I think it is harder. I'm being a little bit unfair in some ways, but because I think it is harder, and it doesn't make it impossible, but it could become another belief.
Yeah.
There's no point in doing anything because we're in a pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that is part of it, and I think it's just fear and lack of confidence. I mean, as much as I'm calling your producer, there are friends of mine that I do the same thing because they've met partners through the pandemic as well.
I think they take being called confidence.
Yeah, and
they understand Scottish humour.
And so that's not a new concept to me.
Yeah.
There is a couple of friends I've got who have, who have sort of found people found each other during the pandemic and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Because I think what happens is, and we all do this in our own way, that if there's something that feels out of our comfort zone or feels challenging, we find the evidence to back the narrative that we've got that helps us feel comfortable where we are. So, let's say, for example, someone is in the wrong relationship and needs to leave a relationship. So, different issue, but is afraid to leave.
Yeah.
They're going to think of all the reasons why it's justified in staying. I'm sure unhappy. Oh, I'm sure it'll get better in time. Oh, well, financially it wouldn't work on my own. Oh, well, actually they sort of need me to support them. I don't want, they go looking for all the evidence that reinforces the perspective they've got.
Yeah.
When the truth is, in that situation, they actually need to leave the relationship. And I think putting a spotlight on the stories that we use to keep ourselves stuck, to keep ourselves kind of comfortable where we are. On one hand, it's quite confronting and it's quite uncomfortable because it's almost like, well, if we haven't got the story, what does that now mean? It means actually we might need to take some action or to do something different. And that uncovers underlying deeper issues around not feeling good enough or inadequacy, for example. But I think it's helpful to see that there's this narrative. There's this story that you're telling yourself that is true. You can find the evidence to make it true, but we can equally find evidence to make a different narrative true. What are some of the other ways? I've been interested to look at some of the examples of how this could play out, right? So, for example, do you have any sort of online dating profile?
Yeah, but not a successful one.
Have you had trusted female input into the writing of your dating profile?
Not particularly.
Because personally, I don't think men should ever be allowed to write their dating profiles. I don't think any of us are capable of doing it well.
Yeah.
So that would be a step, right? To take, a trusted, one or two friends and say, help me write a dating profile that honestly represents me in a good light.
Yeah.
When you think about doing that, what I'm really interested in because what probably comes up is some resistance or defensiveness, or what comes up in response to that idea?
It's like an icy hand squeezes my bowels.
Say that again?
It's like an icy hand squeezes my bowels.
Right.
It
feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, I don't feel. Yeah, I feel weird about it. I don't feel particularly comfortable with it.
Can you say more about that discomfort? Because what I think is really important, David, is it'd be very easy to just ignore the discomfort. I actually want to honor the discomfort because it's trying to protect you. It's there for a valid reason.
Yeah.
And trying to ignore it isn't going to help.
Yeah.
It's actually more helpful for us to understand it.
Yeah. There's a rawness and vulnerability about it where, you kind of know how certain people feel about you and what they think of you, but you kind of don't want to see it written down necessarily.
There's something about bringing the many great qualities that you have into the dating David as opposed to the friend David. And my guess is, and I haven't dated you, so I don't know this to be necessarily true, but my guess from what you're saying,
I give good cuddles.
my guess is that the you that's a friend, that the great qualities of humor and loyalty and care and those sorts of things, that in a dating role, my guess is that you're less able to be your confident self, and there's something else. Does something else happen, or you overcompensate, or what? Yeah, in that, or is it that you're not getting the chance even to be in that role with people?
I don't know. I mean, I would say that for whatever reason, I haven't had that chance for a while, or for any sort of length of time, really. But I would say that, most of the times I've been in long-term relationships, they've kind of almost happened by accident. And that hasn't really been a worry. I mean, if anything, I'm a bit of a feeder. So I'm funny and a feeder. So, who wouldn't want that? But, yeah, so, I mean, it's not really a question I can kind of sort of answer. I don't think I think I'm less confident at the start of a relationship, or, before a relationship becomes a relationship.
Yeah, I hear that.
But I'm pretty honest with people. The things that, some of the things that, that affect my confidence are, to do with disability and stuff like that. And, usually that stuff's out of the way quite quickly.
Yes.
But it's just getting to that point.
But it's interesting what you say that normally it's happened by accident, because in a sense, what it sounds like is that you haven't had to do that dating bit in the more traditional way, let's say. But that also means that at the point where you potentially are ready to and want to be in a relationship, you're then not able to very easily be proactive about it. You're waiting for something to happen by accident. In a sense, it's figuring out what's the strategy that's most likely to be successful. And at the moment, the strategy is there's a set of beliefs and inner judgments and the Jiminy Cricket voice, which is a massive barrier to doing anything.
Yeah.
And then there's a strategy which is basically it needs to happen by accident, which is if we were betting on the likelihood of you successfully meeting someone in the next 3 to 6 months, I don't think we'd bet very high odds on that. So in a sense, it's how do we stack the odds more in your favor? And part of that's working on the inner psychology piece, but part of it is also like the actual strategy that you're using. And in a sense, it's a little bit like if we're backing a horse. We want to look at every bit of that training process and how does one make the horse, I'm not necessarily horse racing, but for example, feeding it the right food, giving it the right training program, whatever, having the right jockey, whatever it may be. So in this instance, it's being on the right dating platform, having the right profile, having someone that helps you write the profile, someone that helps you vet the dates, having someone that helps you with not going too far with banter too quickly, or like whatever it might be in terms of the strategy. And then it's looking at when you do go on, so it's getting the right dates and getting some volume of dates.
Yeah.
And then it's going on the dates and how do you best, most honestly and most kind of confidently represent yourself. And I'm totally not a fan of dating psychology of, be the person they want you to be or be your best self, because it's a complete recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
The sooner they see the real you, the better, because that's the person they're going to be having a relationship with. So you may as well just be yourself. But going back to the last few sessions, and just to kind of just put it back in more of the context, that there's a feeling of aloneness and loneliness that's been there. And as we've said, part of that is a gateway to a deeper connection with yourself and working with some of the deeper emotions that are there. But it's also a valid message from your heart, which is saying, there's something in my life which feels like it's missing at this point. And this is an honoring of that ultimately. And the recognizing that some of the low mood is a result of that's something that's missing in life. Some of the anxiety and the elevated state is probably the result of not having the kind of soothing kind of contact of someone that just normalizes and helps us regulate in a sense. And I'm totally not a fan of people going into a relationship to fix their issues. I think it's much healthier to work one's issues and come from a complete place. And there's a point in life where the natural healthy thing is to be if that's what one wants, to be looking for and coming into a relationship. So just to remind ourselves of why we're having the conversation that we're having, I think it's a balance then between working on the issues, and we'll certainly talk more about that, and changing the strategy. And often in the changing of the strategy, there's all kind of resistance that comes up, like the stuff we've been talking about, like what's the point? It's a pandemic. I'm not good at it anyway. And sometimes the most helpful way to deal with that resistance is just to get on and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because we could spend the next 6 months exploring the resistance. Now, there's value in that, and I'm sure we'll do some of that. But we don't want to wait to the perfect moment, the perfect time to just start taking the action that starts to change potentially things. How does it feel if we just kind of put it in that wider context?
Daunting, but not necessarily not worth doing.
Right. I'm also hoping that we're coming to this with some wind in your sails with the change at work that you've made.
I mean, it's the job's been good so far.
I often think also with these sorts of things that the hardest thing is getting something moving. Once it gets moving, one gets momentum. It's like having a stationary car, and it takes 3 people to kind of push it to get it jump started. But once it starts moving, one person can keep it moving. And it's like drawing in the support of a few friends to get it shaped and get it right. But then you've got some momentum with it. But the hardest thing is that first step. And it's the most, in many ways, it's the most vulnerable thing, because it's like you're saying to people that you care about there's something that I want to change and I would like some help in changing it. And that is a vulnerable thing to do. It takes a lot of courage to do that. What questions do you have?
Do I have to? No, none at the moment. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So the goal is by when I see you next, we'll look at diaries in a minute, to have met with a friend or two, got the profile up, and I'm not going to give you targets in terms of number of dates and stuff because we don't know how that piece moves, but to at least get it up and to have some real world feedback, let's say.
Right.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I feel your enthusiasm, David.
Just bubbling over now.
It's infectious.
Yeah.
Good. And good luck.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see how it goes. Hope you found this week's episode helpful. I think this is a really important episode because for me, what it shows is that talking about things, understanding things, metabolizing things is all really important. But ultimately, if we want the circumstances of our life to be different, we have to take action. We have to do something. And that really was my challenge and my invitation to David in this week's episode. So here's my top tip on how to set boundaries is an act of self-love. You've got to start somewhere. What tends to happen is we make things much bigger, much more complicated, much more overwhelming, and putting that boundary in place with ourselves feels impossible. But if you think about small children, for children to feel safe, they need boundaries. Those boundaries need to be strong, but they need to be sensitive as well. But if our parents feel overwhelmed by having this child and don't know what to do with them, they never start, the boundaries never begin. If we need to do difficult things in our lives, we have to show up to ourselves. And to do that, we need to put in place that boundary where we say, I need to change this, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to start now. I'm really excited to see how this unfolds for David, and I'd love to hear from you. Whereabouts in your life do you need more boundaries? Where do you need to commit to yourself to follow through? I just want to let you know that my new free 3-part video series on healing emotional overload, emotional trauma, it's a prelude to my new upcoming coaching program, the Heart Program, launches this Thursday. So do look out for that. In next week's episode, we're going to be catching up with Katie. Katie's going through a challenging time. Some of her family circumstances have been getting complicated, and the external criticism starting to fuel her inner critic. Something that can happen that's really important to catch and learn to defend from. Here's a taste of what's coming up next week.
It's a sad state of affairs when you end up telling all your problems to a bloody mobile phone, isn't it? Because you can't find anybody else in your life to support you.
What does the little girl in you feel right now? She feels upset. What else does she feel?
Unheard, I suppose.
And unseen.
Unseen, yeah.
Like she's feeling pain and no one's holding her and no one's there for her.